I'm gonna let you all get away with it this weekend, or this week, I should say. It's my weekend already, yours too. But in the future, if we can not fill all the way from the back down, okay? I mean, I like the fact you're spread out and stuff like that, give yourself some rooms, but try to fill down more to the bottom, vice the top. I mean, if you imagine being a speaker down here, and afterwards, if you'd like to come down and experience it yourself, you can see. But imagine being here, looking all the way up at the top, and all this area is pretty thin. So just consider that in the future and work your way down and not make me have to go and police that, all right? Appreciate it. We're down to about the halfway point. I hope you all had a good break. I hope everybody's excited about the game this week. And how many people were here last Saturday? So most of you came back. That's good. I assume you came back and didn't just stick around the whole time and study, right? But so this is kind of the second half of the semester, second half of the speaker series, and I think we're really getting to a good half here. We got some pretty interesting speakers with some unique and diverse backgrounds and stuff like that, and I think there's an opportunity here for you. And again, as a reminder, this is a speaker series, but it's more of an engagement series. So I ask you to think and about things and ask questions, okay? You don't get too many opportunities to talk with CEOs and CFOs and COOs, and especially in different industries. I know everybody thinks they've got it all figured out and they know what they want to do and stuff like that, but there's a lot that's changing in the world if you haven't figured that out already. You know, stores today don't look like stores of yesterday. The stores of the future, who knows what they're going to look like, energy companies and stuff like that. So, you know, for our business students in the class, you know, with foresight, we try to get you to start thinking and looking at things, how places evolve. And so when you get a speaker today, like Mr. Crudele, who I'll introduce shortly, you know, it's a good chance to pick his brains as to, you know, how he sees things going and how, as a graduate of Notre Dame, how he migrated through his career, what changes he's seen. I'm sure he'll address some of those kind of things. But I'm sure there's something that's going to spur, you know, kind of spur a little bit of that interest or a follow-on. I'd like to explore that option a little bit more, and I ask that you do that, okay? This is a great opportunity, and this is meant not to be just sitting at the back of the top and us talking to you, but rather coming down and engaging and asking questions. And don't be afraid to ask the questions, okay? But anyways, as I already kind of hinted, today our guest speaker is Mr. Anthony Crudele, who recently, you know, I think when I put out to you guys in email, has already a little bit changed from then. So he recently became the lead director for Hibbett Sports Incorporated, which he'll probably talk a little bit about, which is a $1 billion athletic-inspired fashion retailer with more than 1,000 stores nationwide. I don't know how best to describe it when you look online. So that's kind of like taking the middle of Dick's Sporting Goods and pulling that out and having that as a separate entity in terms of like apparel and sports apparels and many of the similar brands and stuff like that. As lead director, he is responsible for advising and guiding the board in developing best practices in the area of strategic planning, capital structure and allocation, enterprise risk management, executive compensation, succession planning, and leadership development. Mr. Crudele previously served as the Vice President and Chief Financial Officer of the Tractor Supply Company from 2005 until March of this year. During his tenure, Tractor Supply was one of the fastest-growing NASDAQ companies, expanding from 500 stores and $2 billion in revenue to 1,500 stores and $6.8 billion in revenue. Mr. Crudele was responsible for all areas of accounting and financial management and oversaw strategic planning, real estate, continuous improvements, information technology, as well as the legal and internal audits of the corporation. Prior to his career with Tractor Supply, Mr. Crudele was the Executive Vice President and CFO for Gibson Guitar Company, where he completed a $70 million refinancing effort that included bifurcation of the company into a core component and development stage entities. He has also served as CFO at the Sports Authority during their high growth periods, and he is in his early career, he's a public accountant principally at Price Waterhouse, rising to senior manager with that firm. Mr. Crudele was a 1978 graduate of the University of Notre Dame, and he was an accountancy major. On that note, please extend a warm welcome to Mr. Anthony Crudele.
Thank you. Well, it's definitely an honor to be here, and I'm very excited. I think we have a really big show for you tonight. And hopefully at the end, you'll be very invigorated after the presentation. So what we'll try to cover on the outline, who is Tractor Supply? Who's this guy talking about the Tractor Supply Company? Then we'll talk a little bit about the company, culture, values, talk a little bit about my background, how I worked through my career, and then we'll talk about the various roles of the CFO. And then we'll wrap up and have questions and come to a conclusion. So who's Tractor Supply? You know, I looked at the agenda, saw some of the speakers, and I realized that this guy that sells tractors or whatever he does is not going to be able to compete with somebody from Chick-fil-A, all right? So, and I saw that presentation, and I don't play the trumpet, and I don't have a mascot, so I knew I was in big trouble. So let me give you a little bit of background about Tractor Supply, and I have a video that I'll kick off for you. It's only a minute, so you can hang in there with me.
We're Tractor Supply Company, the largest rural lifestyle retail store chain in the United States. We don't sell tractors, but we do sell pretty much everything else for what we call life out here. Our mission is to be the most dependable supplier of quality products at fair prices, and we deliver on that promise with legendary customer service, including straightforward advice based on real experience. Tractor Supply stores are strategically positioned in primarily rural communities as a convenient one-stop shop with a variety of unique products that customers can't find in any other single location. In short, we know our customers. We listen to them carefully and shop side by side with them to establish Tractor Supply as the authority for consumers living the out here lifestyle.
All right, so hopefully that gives you a little bit of a background. The one thing that we don't do is we do not sell tractors, but we sell a whole bunch of other stuff. Now, when I first was interviewing for Tractor Supply, you always have to go and visit the stores before you go in to the offices for the interview. I walked into the store and I said to myself, I just don't get it. They had all types of merchandise and none of it made any sense the way they put it together. But what you learn is that you're appealing to a lifestyle. And we call it the rural lifestyle. And where it really came out of, it came out from farm and ranch. But when you think about it, farm and ranch just doesn't have quite the appeal as rural lifestyle. And so probably from a strategic standpoint, where the company really started to take off was when we realized that we weren't serving just farm and ranchers, we were serving a rural lifestyle. And it's just people that live out here. And so the merchandise is put together to appeal to that group. Now the company's 79 years old. It started as a cataloger, and they finally opened up a store in Minot, North Dakota. And so you say, why not Minot? And it's really because when they were selling their catalogs, most of the sales were coming from North Dakota. So they thought it makes sense to open up their first store. Since then, they really grew up to 1,700 stores. The significant growth really came from about mid-90s on. And when I joined the company in 2005, there was about 550 stores, and now they're at 1,700 stores. About 24,000 employees. The store model is about 12 to 15 folks in the store. Half of them are full-time, about half that are part-time. And we've grown to about almost $7 billion. I'm sure this year they'll crack the $7 billion number. Largest retailer of rural lifestyle, but what you probably didn't know, and probably what afforded me the opportunity to retire fairly early in life, is that from October of 2000 to October 2013, Tractor Supply was the largest percentage gainer on the NASDAQ stock exchange. And even if you take a little bit different time period, say 2000, 2015, we were still third behind Monster Beverage and Green Mountain Coffee. So we had a really exciting growth opportunity and took advantage of it. I'm not clicking. There you go. So the mix of merchandise, I said, it's somewhat eclectic. So you can walk into the store and you're going to see a lot of livestock feed, all right? And you have large animal and then you have pet. And you also have an outside side lot where we're selling corral panels and fencing. You're going to have some seasonal items like we basically have 2 seasons, spring and then the winter. So in the spring, you got riding lawnmowers, you have a lot of lawn and garden. In the winter, you have snow blowers. So it's a real mix, and it's really geared towards that do-it-yourselfer. And as you can see, sales just in the last 5 years more than doubled, EPS more than doubled. So, and we had a really nice machine going where we had growth top line because we were opening up stores, and at the same time, we continued to become more efficient. Boy, I'm just not doing well. So culture. All right, Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I'll tell you, it's a statement that I wholeheartedly agree with. And so at Tractor Supply, we always talked about the culture, and we kept it very simple, but it becomes foundational. It's part of the fabric of the company. Simple mission statement: work hard, have fun, make money, legendary service, great products, everyday low price. We tended to always drop the last part, and we always would walk around and say, work hard, have fun, make money. And people could relate to that. It became a mantra. But the values, if you look at the 10 values, very, very simple. People can relate to them. And it would embody what the company is about. So I encourage you, when you're looking at a company, if you go on an interview and you meet 3 to 4 to 5 people, and not one of them brings up the company's missions and values, it may not be the right place for you. So it's very critical in establishing that company and who they are. With that, I have another quick video that they have, and it talks about the missions and values.
Whether it's one store or thousands, an army of team members or a dedicated few, whether it's a whole truck or a single bag, it's all built on one thing: our mission and values. Our mission and values are more than just words on the wall. They're the backbone when times get tough, the one constant in an ever-changing environment, and the bedrock on which we build our culture. Work hard, have fun, make money. It isn't just what we do that sets us apart, it's how we do it. We work with
ethics,
respect, balance, winning attitude,
communication,
development,
teamwork,
change,
initiative.
accountability.
No matter what you do, no matter where you work at Tractor Supply, our mission and values will always be at the center of everything we do. It's the core of who we are and the foundation of every decision we make. Work hard, have fun, make money. It's who we are, it's what we do.
So we'll do videos like this, and it reinforces our position. A lot of times you talk about company culture, you say, you know, what is it? What's the company culture? I'll tell you that it will always take on the characteristics of the leadership, all right? So it has to come from the top. So you have to walk the walk, walk the talk. So a couple things about how do you establish it, and what do you look for? Number one on the list is what we call servant leadership. So a fellow back in the 70s coined the term, Robert Greenleaf, worked for IBM, wrote a book, and he basically said, you need to invert the pyramid. So that the CEO is not at the top of the pyramid. He's actually at the bottom, serving the team members, serving the customers, serving the stakeholders. So you have to invert the pyramid, and you want the leadership to talk about that. Then you must support the values. all right? So how do you do that? You constantly talk about them. You have meetings, you kick them off. We have manager training, so a new store manager has to come into the store support center and go through a training, and every one of the executives talks to them for half an hour, and each executive had a different value to talk about that they would cover in their speech. So that's just a way of trying to reinforce that. The other thing is that you have to consistently handle violations. Now this might have been harsh, but I heard of a situation where we said that store managers are not allowed to leave the store with any merchandise without paying for it. And one person went at lunch and took some food stuff and some Coke and went outside. And I'm sure there's more to the story, but that eventually led to his termination. So you have to enforce them and make sure that everybody understands that we're all playing by the same value system. So some other examples. Store support center. I went to interview at the company. I walked in and it was a U-shaped building, and one side sign said store support center this way. I figured I better go that way because that's got to be the IT area. I went in, couldn't get into the doors, obviously had to go back over. Well, Tractor Supply calls their corporate headquarters the store support center because it's there to support the stores. Again, a way that we communicate the culture and who we're about. Assigned parking at Tractor Supply for the executives. Well, our assigned parking for executives is if you come in early, you'll get a really good spot. So again, it reinforces that we're not any different. The leadership is not any different than the rest of the team members. Open doors, no separate suites for the executives. The doors are always open. Anytime I saw a closed door meeting going on, I was very suspicious of what was going on in that meeting because the door should be open. First name, stay on a first name basis. Take some time, eat lunch. The leadership should be eating lunch in the lunchroom with the rest of the team members. Executives visiting stores were always out in the stores, but at least a minimum 4 times a year, the executive team would go out into the stores and find out what's going on. We relate to the store members, we talk to the customers. It wasn't those visits where we'd go in and tell them what they're doing wrong. We basically would go in and ask them, what can we do better? Are you getting the right merchandise? Are you getting the merchandise on time? Are you being able to get the back rooms out? How's your payroll staffing? We would ask them, and once you do that, all of a sudden they start volunteering information. And you can go back to your store support center and say, we need to make this place better. And then empowering people. We would always tell our store managers, you have to serve the customer, you have to make the decisions on the floor, you're empowered to do that. And you never make a mistake if you are satisfying a customer need. So those are some of the things, tangible things, that differentiate companies. And I think it's very critical to the success of the company. Now, as a CFO, what can you do? Well, number one is limit the perks, all right? You don't need to have a lot of executive benefits, all right? So our company plane, it was purple with a little orange and it had Southwest written on it. And we had this fleet of company cars that are yellow and have taxi written on the side of it. And we might have to update that for this Uber thing going on. So, but the other thing is you have to provide the tools for your team members. You can't be so restrictive with your costs that you're not developing your people, or that goes against one of our values, which is development. We were in 3 buildings because we were expanding so quickly. We were leasing 3 buildings in about a 5-block area, and we decided it would benefit the company if we could consolidate, put the store support center. We built our own building, saved on costs. It was less expensive to build an $80 million building to house about 700 folks. But at the same time, we made it energy efficient. So people could relate to that and they could see that the company had the right values in place. And then, again, cost savings. You want to save costs, but at the same time, not at all costs. So it's critical, and these are some of the things that you do in your position in leadership to make sure that the company has the right culture. So one of my former CEOs would always say, and this guy had so many sayings, when he left the company, we actually did a book of his sayings and gave it to him as a going away present. But he always referred to company cultures like the beach, and that it was sand on the beach. Because if you don't replenish it, it starts to erode one grain of sand at a time. And he's right, because I can see as we've grown from 500 stores to 1,500 stores, it's just hard to touch all those people. And unless you're constantly reinforcing the culture, it will slowly erode. So it's always important to continue to nurture your culture. All right, so a little bit about my background, and I'll tell you a few stories. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and I came up to the University of Notre Dame, graduated in 1978. And I will tell you, I've always been impressed on how you all would do research on where you want to go, your careers, what's the best college, what fits the curriculum the best. You apply to 15 different colleges. I do like the application process where it's really easy to do a whole bunch at one time. I had a little bit simpler approach. I went to a small Catholic high school, and my mom said to me, what would make me really proud is if you went to a good Catholic college or university. And I said, oh, like what? She goes, well, what about Notre Dame? I said, okay, that sounds pretty good. I sent my application in, I got in, and that was all I did. I didn't even send in a second, so I don't know what I would have done if I hadn't gotten in. And I'm sure today, I don't think I would have the right qualifications to get in. Went to Notre Dame and said, God awfully cold, and headed right back to Miami. And I did a stint at, I actually got hired at what was known back then as Pete, Mark, and Mitchell. And you know them today as KPMG. I was there for a little bit, worked at a local firm, and then had 8.5 years at Price Waterhouse. And I'll give you a couple stories relative to how I moved through some of these positions. I was at the Sports Authority for 10.5 years during the high growth period of the 90s. Tremendous experience, and that's where I eventually was CFO for the last 3 years when we were a public company. Had a change out in management team. Again, saw a new individual come in, tried to change the culture, was not very effective. I moved on and went to a small e-commerce integrator. Bad timing, January 2000, we burst in April 2000. We sort of hung in there, and after about 3 years, we sold the company to another integrator. Had an opportunity to move from Miami, Fort Lauderdale area, and went up and worked at Gibson Guitar as the CFO, and then eventually came to Tractor Supply and had been there for 11.5 years. And then most recently, as noted, I'm the lead director at Hibbett Sporting Goods. 1,000 stores, mostly in the Southeast, about $1 billion in sales, NASDAQ listed, and it's been a great opportunity because they basically are going through everything that I've gone through over the last 11 years. On a personal note, I have 2 sons. I've been married for 32 years. My oldest is a sophomore here at Notre Dame. A terrific young man, very proud of him, and I think he's doing well. At least that's what his report card says. And I have a high school senior, and if there's anybody from admissions here, he would really like to come to Notre Dame. So he will be applying early admissions submission. His name is Kyle. Kyle Crudele. All right. I had to make that play. All right, so what's the difference between me and you? Well, it's about 40 years. Now, this is intended to sort of scare you because the 40 years goes by really quickly. All right? And so, but believe it or not, this was just like you about 40 years ago. All right. This guy was an inter-hall football all-star, okay? Not only that, basketball. No jokes about the shorts or the socks, okay? That was the style. It was very cool back then. All right. That led to not only that, dual championships in basketball and volleyball. All right. I don't think that's ever been accomplished ever since then. And I have the proof. All right. The Letterman's jacket that says Fisher Hall, basketball champs, 1977. And I have from reliable sources that still to this day is one of the most disappointing defeats that Joe Montana ever had. Okay. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about career progression. And so as we go through this, I want you to think about a couple things. Luck. A lot of people say, yeah, you need a little bit of luck as you go through your career. Well, luck is defined force that seems to operate for good or ill in a person's life, shaping circumstances or events. All right, so think about that as we go through this. Then you have fate. All right, and that's which is inevitably predetermined or destiny. So sometimes, there's a road there's a path that's there for you. You just need to follow it. So think about that as we go through a couple of these stories. Now, your career. You have to manage your career. All right, you just can't take it for granted. And so you have to develop it, you have to nurture it, you have to manage it. We always say, plan your work, work your plan. And it's the same not just for your day-to-day work, but it's the same for your career. All right? And so you're going to be in different positions. And in those positions, what you have to do is you have to bloom where you're planted. All right? And we'd always use that expression. Bloom where you are planted. And so when you're in that particular, you don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know who you're going to affect or who you have the opportunity to impress. So you always have to pick that next challenge and do the best you can with that opportunity. And I'll give you an example. When I graduated, I had not worked in any business environment. So it was a little bit of a struggle at KPMG. I didn't know the difference between a check copy and an invoice and a voucher, and it just took me a while to start to figure this out. So I went on my first engagement. I was in the office unassigned. They called up and they said, hey, we need somebody out here to foot schedules. All right, foot schedules is just really a term, I think, back in the day where you just add schedules. And they had these computer sheets, pages and pages that I needed to foot. Well, again, I keep referring to back in the day, but we didn't even have little adding machines. We actually had what they called the 10 keys. I mean, this thing was huge. And when you keyed in a number and hit the plus sign, the whole thing would shake and the table would shake, all right? So I go out there and I'm keying. And the senior comes up to me and goes, how you doing? And I said, well, I'm through like this page. He goes, that's all you've got? He goes, boy, you're awfully slow. He goes, but don't worry, you'll get better. It just takes a little bit of time. You'll be fine. I said, oh, thanks. I'm feeling a little bit better. End of the day comes by. I show him the work that I've done and how far I'm at. And he looks at me and he goes, you know, I don't think I've ever seen anybody as slow as you on the 10 key. And I said, I felt bad. But he gave me some advice. He said, Tony, what you need to do is you need to go back to your home with the 10 key and you need to foot the phone book. So, got to foot the phone book. All right. And so, but I did that. I went. Sometimes I do the first 3. Sometimes I do the last 4. If I got really ambitious, I do all 7. And I would tell you, after about a year, I don't think there was one person that was faster than me when it came to adding numbers. And so, granted, I didn't want to be the guy that called all the time to come out and foot numbers for him, but people understood that I was going to take on the challenge. I was going to do the best I can, no matter what the opportunity that was presented in front of me. Another example would be healthcare. When I was at Price Waterhouse, they wanted to have specialty groups. And they asked me to sort of head up the audit side of their healthcare practice in the South Florida office. Well, to tell you the truth, I really didn't like healthcare. And they had all these regulations, and then you'd get clients where you go into a hospital, and it just was depressing. and I did not enjoy it. But it was a potential career path. I did the best I could with that opportunity, and obviously had a reasonably good career at Price Waterhouse, being there for over 10 years. I guess actually 8.5. So do your best to bloom where you're planted. The other thing that I would tell you is a lot of times you'll find a job and you'll be a little disappointed in that position. Don't job hop. All right. Anytime I got a resume in front of me that somebody worked for 10 years and they had 5 different jobs of 2 years each, I would just go to the next resume. So a lot of times you're going to be in some positions where you might not be happy with that particular job or opportunity at that time, but work your way through it. Put some credible experience on your resume before you move on. All right, I have 3 stories to tell you about my career, and again, try to relate it back to whether I got a little lucky or had a little bit of fate. All right, path to Price Waterhouse. I struggled a little bit at KPMG, so I had to do what I always term as going to purgatory. I went to a local firm, all right? And I was there for about 1.5 years, and it was difficult. It was just not like public accounting. Public accounting was like just cool and prestigious, and here I am now working on an audit during the day, and during the tax season, they want you to come into the office and do tax returns. And I'm going, I'm not a tax person, but that's the way they operated. There was no mileage allowance, there was no meal allowance. If you wanted a meal and you're gonna work late, you had to actually call up the office and order it and go to the office and eat it there. I mean, these people were strict. And then I think what probably did me in was, on one engagement, it was a construction engagement, and I was in a trailer getting eaten up by mosquitoes down in South Florida, and it just wasn't overly appealing to me. So I thought, I need to make a career change. And I had this opportunity to work at a utility in South Florida, Florida Power and Light, 8 to 5, no overtime. And they were gonna pay for my MBA. I said, this is easy street. And I think they were paying a whopping, at the time, $33,000, a lot of money. But I also had an opportunity to work at Price Waterhouse for $5,000 less, with lots of overtime, and they're not gonna pay for any schools. And I had to make a choice. And again, I would tell you, through a career, don't walk away from the tougher choice. You have to persevere. And I said, I'm gonna do this. I enjoy public accounting. I know I can be very successful in public accounting. And I made the determination to go to Price Waterhouse, which I think was the right choice and led to a lot of opportunities. Question is, I don't know what would have happened if I went and got my MBA. Could have been a completely different story, could have been very successful, but I feel I made the right choice. I persevered, and I took the tougher road. All right, CFO opportunity. A lot of people say, how do you get the CFO title? And I would tell you, I get a lot of opportunities, you know, a recruiter calls and we're looking for a CFO, and I'll recommend somebody that's either working for me or I know of that's not a CFO. And they always say, oh, we need a sitting CFO. I go, well, if everybody wants to hire a sitting CFO, how does anybody get to be a CFO unless you're already one? So it's really critical to get that moniker. So how did I get mine? People ask. All right, I will tell you. I was in the office, I was at Price Waterhouse. I was in the office, I was unassigned. Now, of course, as a senior manager, you really should be out gouging clients. I mean, charging clients for the services. And so I was unassigned, and the partner came in and said, are you unassigned? I sheepishly said, yes, I'm unassigned. He goes, could you join me for a meeting? I have a prospective client to come in. I said, absolutely. So met with the client. 2 folks come in, CEO and a CFO, and we said, what do you got? They go, well, we don't really have anything right now, but we're gonna open some stores, and we're gonna open up a sporting goods store. We said, oh, okay. Well, why don't you open up those stores, and when you do that, come back, and we'll be your auditors. And they said, well, we really just wanted to talk to you because as we go through this process, we might need some advice about, incorporating and getting the stores up and running and accounting periods and all that. And we said, absolutely, here's my card, give us a call. We maintained contact with them. Well, instead of the CEO just saying, you're our auditors, he came back and said, the board, they had some venture capital in the deal, 3 or 4 different venture capitalists. They said, we would like to do a request for proposal, an RFP. And we said, no problem. He said, Tony, why don't you put together an RFP? You met these folks, put it together. All right, we put it together, sent it in, figured it's a formality. CEO calls up the audit partner and says, got some bad news for you. The board really likes Deloitte. We said, oh, okay. We're a little disappointed. But then he said, you know what? They told me they liked Deloitte, but they didn't tell me I had to pick them. So I'm picking you guys. We said, okay. And so in the proposal process, we were going to do a little switch and bait. We were going to put my name in on the proposal as a senior manager, but I had no retail experience. I had no idea about retail. But we had one young lady in the office that had some experience in retail. We were going to put her in as the manager on the job. And I was going to sort of slowly sneak off and disappear, and she would take over the engagement. Well, since we went through this process, we realized there's some pretty heavy hitters on this board. One of which you may recognize. And I don't think that you can see the handwriting up in the corner, the signature in the corner, but he was a venture capitalist from Bain Consulting. And turned out to be this guy, who became somewhat popular and probably influential in politics. So he was one of the decision makers on it. And the partner came back to me and said, Tony, you better stay on this engagement. You know the folks, you met them all, and there's some heavy hitters, and I don't want to mess this up. You stay on the engagement. So obviously that company was the Sports Authority. After doing two audits, I joined the company as Vice President Controller. The CFO really wanted to be the COO and President, which he eventually moved to. And when he moved there, I became the CFO and was there as a public company for the last 3 years as CFO. So, moral of the story is when someone asks me how I became CFO, I tell them I was sitting around the office one day not doing anything. And that's how I got my CFO moniker. So again, relate that back to whether it's fate, destiny, or what have you, or just pure luck. Sometimes you just have to take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to you. All right, so I'll give you another, last example, last little storytelling for the day when it comes to the career. Tractor Supply. All right, we were down in South Florida. We had the opportunity to finally move out of South Florida. We were down there mostly because my mom had lived there. She passed away, and I wanted to live someplace else. So I get a call, and my wife and I agreed no farther north than Tennessee, North Carolina. That's it. Southeast and no farther north. But got a call from a recruiter, said, got this opportunity in Nashville. I said, okay, Nashville, it fits the description. Came up, it's a public company. I interviewed with them. They were looking for a CFO. They had sort of some tough times. They had some conversations with the street that they had to get through. And they thought I was a good choice. Recruiter said, Tony, you're the guy. They like you. They just need to check references. They checked my references from the Sports Authority. They were tremendous. They were wonderful. In fact, the recruiter said they were so good, they want to talk to the person at the Sports Authority that you worked for 1 year. I said, okay, I can do that. So we gave them the reference. That person did not call them back for 1 week. I knew I was done. So again, if you ever have to give a recommendation, call them right away. Because the longer you wait, the more it says what you're going to tell about that individual. All right? They talked to that individual 1 week later. The next day, coincidentally, I was no longer the guy. So again, You have to know who your references are going to be. But I knew that was going to be a little bit difficult. But on the brighter side, literally one day later, a recruiter called me and said, hey, we got this opportunity in Nashville. And I said, I was just in Nashville 2 weeks ago. I said, seemed like a nice town, I'll go back. Well, it turned out that it was Gibson Guitar. And I go in, and they do the one-day interview. Seven people. I meet them all day. HR guy comes in at the end, he goes, I know you have a flight at the end of the day, but I think you're the guy, and if you stay overnight, I think we can seal this deal. I said, all right, I'm staying overnight. And we seal the deal. Now, I will tell you one thing. This is another tip when you're doing your interviews. If you do an all-day interview and you meet 7 people, and the first thing they tell you, each individual says, have you read about our CEO? That's a bad sign, all right? Now, you get somebody like myself and says, this guy has never worked with me before, all right? I'm his guy. He just hasn't had the right guy. And I said, all right. All right, so I get the position at Gibson. Thought it'd be pretty cool, right? You know, Gibson Guitar. I'm thinking, all right, nose ring, couple tats. All right, I'm in. And it turned out to be a really difficult experience. And again, that's why I go back to company culture. Smaller company, privately held, run pretty much by CEO, Harvard MBA guy. But in the 2 years that I was there, I was on my third person of everybody in management. Everybody in management. Third head of legal, third head of HR, third COO, third head of marketing, third head of sales. It was great because I met a lot of people, made a lot of contacts, but we were always concerned that he read the Jack Welch book that you should turn your management team about 10% a year. Well, we thought he misread it and saw an extra zero, and it was 100% a year. So it was a real struggle. And at the time when I went to resign, I didn't know how to resign because I had never met anybody that resigned. They all would be asked to leave with the standard line of, it's just not working out. One marketing person joined and was gone in 29 days. I kept track. So difficult place to work, and it was really a little unfortunate, but very tremendous people, passionate people about the business. It just was a difficult environment. So I'm there. I had relocated my family. I didn't want to relocate them again, so I just kept low profile, and I'd look for some opportunities. And all of a sudden, there was this opportunity to work for some tractor company in Nashville. I had heard of them, great reputation. I thought, this is terrific. And so it's a retailer. I got 10 years of retail, high growth. I said, I'm their guy. I'm in Nashville. You know, I'm their guy. Well, unfortunately, they had a little bit different perspective. They're doing a national search, and they're thinking the exact opposite. There's no way there are guys right here in our backyard in Nashville. So, and the other difficulty was when they brought in another candidate, they would meet 5, 6, 7 people in one meeting, but Tony, we can bring him back one at a time. Well, as I'll usually say later, we had a mantra that was hire hard, manage easy. Well, they did that to me because I interviewed for 6 months, came back to the office 6 times. 7th time was dinner with the wives, and eventually they came to realize that I was their guy. I still think to this day it was only because I was the only one they could afford. So I was very excited to have that opportunity. And you know, I look at how the company progressed, and what was always interesting to me was that from 2000 to 2005, my predecessor had served, and I was looking for an opportunity when he started in 2000. And I said, I'd always tell my wife, you know, why couldn't I found it then? And she would always say, you never have moved from South Florida to work for some tractor company. You just wouldn't do it. Well, why that sticks in my mind is because When I started at Gibson Guitar, Tractor Supply was literally across the street. If I had turned left, I would go into their parking lot. I'd turn right, I'd turn into Gibson Guitar. So every time she says that, I sit back and I think, you know, there was a purpose or a mission for me to get to Tractor Supply, and the only way that I could get there was getting up to Tennessee through Gibson Guitar. So again, I look back and I say, sometimes you have to go through purgatory to get to heaven. So that's how I wound up at Tractor Supply, and obviously we had tremendous growth since then, and was just a tremendous opportunity, and obviously it's given me some opportunities to be able to be here today and retire a little earlier. So in summary, I'll give you a couple quotes on fate and destiny. All right, luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. So make sure that you're prepared. Do your homework, nurture your career, make sure you're ready for that opportunity. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% of how I react to it, all right? So you're not always gonna have the best opportunities, but it's a matter of how you react to it. And then for all the do-it-yourselfers, tractor-type folks, opportunity is missed by most people because it's dressed in overalls and it looks like a lot of work, all right? All right, so roles of the CFO. Sometimes you're a teacher or a mentor. Sometimes you might have to be a financial expert, an investment banker type. Other times you might do some customer research. I finally got a tat, so. And then store operations, you might have to really get out there and understand how the business works. So you can see that there's a lot of different roles that you have to play as a CFO. Now on this one, what actually had transpired was we were thinking about splitting the stock, and I asked my controller to go and interview different people and get their perspectives on splitting stocks, and he met these individuals. I have no idea who they are, but they all gave an opinion on why you should not split your stock. And of course, we didn't listen to any of them, and we wound up splitting the stock, I think 2 times in 4 years. All right, so what are the real roles of the CFO? Managing people. Number one, you have to be a leader and you have to manage. I have process improvement on the list. Just say no. You have to predict the future. You have to have a great capital allocation plan. You need to be a good communicator. And you should, in the ultimate role, the CFO should be your strategic partner. All right, so managing people. We have a lot of sayings at Tractor Supply. Most of them came from Jim Wright, our former CEO. But we always would say, put the who before the what. People are more important than the task that they're going to be doing. Make sure you hire the right person. As I mentioned earlier, we always said, hire hard, manage easy. Take the time, hire the right people. You all will be going through this process. They're going to be looking at you. Take the time to understand what they're looking for and meet their criteria. But the more time you put in hiring, the less time you have to put in as managing. Hire for passion, train for skill. Get people that love what they do. You can teach them skills, all right? Empower people. We always would say enable people to fail often, early, and cheaply. All right, and you need to give them that opportunity. Make them feel that they're participating. You know, it's funny, in retail, we would say plagiarism is legal and very effective, all right? Because you can go out and you can look at different retailers and you can use what they're doing. I mean, it's not considered plagiarism. So we encourage people to go out and look what's going on, and we'll try something different. You know, and it may not work for us, but if we do it quickly and inexpensively, we'll learn. Inspect what you expect. So at the same time you want to empower people, you have to look at their work. Make sure they're doing it correctly. You need to trust them, but you need to verify what they're doing. Then at the same time, you want to teach the teachable, coach the coachable, and say goodbye to the laggards. All right? A lot of times you put a lot of time and effort into somebody that's just not going to make it. You have to cut bait and move on. Again, little term that we have in retail was, we're going to promote you to customer. All right? And so that would be our way of saying it's time for you to move on. And then the other thing that I would tell you is, people do not leave companies. People leave their bosses. All right? And that's why it's critical that you show leadership and you manage people properly. So and give you an example. This is, I always remember this. It was the attorney at Tractor Supply. First week I was there, she was actually going to be one of my direct reports. And she came from the cutthroat, professional, legal law firm environment. And she came up to me and she said, "Oh, this place is just terrific. It's wonderful. Oh, I just love working here." And she said, you know what they tell you if you make a mistake? They say, "Don't worry about it." I said, "Yeah, okay, that sounds pretty good." He goes, "You know what they do when you make a really big mistake?" And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." You know, I had no idea what she was going to say. She said, "They put their arm around you and they say, 'How can we make this better?'" And I was like, and it was true that is the way the culture was at Tractor Supply. And that's why it's important on how you manage people. You want them to feel that you're always going to be there to support them. All right, process improvement. As a CFO, you have to be involved in the operations. You cannot manage from your desk. And a lot of folks will do that. They just, "Oh, you know, I'm looking at the numbers and you know, we'll do some high financing and we'll do a debt deal or something." You can't do that nowadays. You have to be involved in the operations. And the CFO at the Sports Authority, who eventually was the president, extremely bright guy, Duke undergrad, Harvard MBA. I won't hold the Harvard thing against him. And he would always, I could never understand how he understood the numbers when he was talking to the analyst on the conference call. He knew every single number. I did learn that on occasion he'd make them up and people just didn't know the difference. But I was always amazed at how he knew the numbers. And I would ask him, how do you do that? And he'd say, "The numbers tell the story." It just always rings through my ears. The numbers tell a story. Because he was so involved in the operations, he didn't have to memorize numbers. Because the numbers all made sense to him. They all told the story of what was going on in the business. And so it's really critical that the CFO stay involved in the operations. The other thing you have to do is you have to embed this cost-saving processes into the day-to-day activities. And one thing that we did at Tractor Supply is we put in a process improvement department. It was sort of based on lean principles for manufacturing. So sort of the Toyota way, the way that the Japanese have continuous improvement. But we set up a department of a couple people, and they would help you solve problems. Well, you can imagine if a receiver in the back room of a store has an issue with the way the freight's coming in and the way he's moving it out, he can't solve that by himself. He needs to talk to the logistics folks. He needs to talk to the delivery managers. He needs to talk to his folks out on the floor in the store on how they're going to move it out. He can't solve it by himself. So we put together a couple of folks that when you had this process issue, you could go to them, they would map it out, they would put a plan together, and they get all the people in a room for 2 days, and they would map the process, they map a new process, they put a game plan together, and you leave after 2 days, and you could have your problem fixed over a period of time. Instead of the old way of, let's meet and talk about it, and then a month later we meet and talk about it again, and then a month later we meet and talk about it again, and nothing ever gets done. Now, people were really afraid of this, believe it or not. They were afraid of this because they thought it was a gotcha. They didn't want to raise their hand and say, "I got a problem," because they thought, well, they get penalized. And these people were really good people. It's not that the penalty was a problem, but they wanted to fix it themselves, but they couldn't. But we set up this process, and after a while, they learned it wasn't a gotcha, and people were raising their hands, and we were fixing a lot of broken processes. So as a CFO, you have to have some type of process in place. You need to use your budget as a cost containment tool. You need to make sure they adhere to it. And again, this is where the culture comes back into play. If you have people that understand the culture and they want to do the right things, they want to follow the values, they're going to follow their budget. They're not going to be over budget and say, oh, could you forgive me, I went over budget, knowing that they intended to the whole time. So again, culture comes into play. And then the other thing that I thought was effective was my financial team. I took some of the folks in accounting and some of the finance folks, and I made them liaisons with different departments in the building, with HR, logistics, marketing. So they had somebody they could go to, and that those individuals could relate to those particular departments, and they could interact. So those are some of the things that you do as a CFO in trying to set up that environment of process improvement and internal controls. All right, hands on the purse string. This is where you can control it. You just have to manage your budget, manage the cash, and just say no. Because you've got some tremendous minds out there. They're gonna ask for money for a lot of different things, and you can't do them all. So what you do, in my case, the way I would manage is I would have an operating budget. There's too many numbers in that operating budget for you to manage. You have to have your operators manage it. So anything that's day-to-day, you create a budget, you tell them they need to stick to it. And they spend to that budget, whatever they need to do. Now, capital. Capital I always refer to as the silent killer. Because you can approve a capital project and it's not going to get expensed right away. It's going to go for 7 years or 10 years or build a building and it's 38 years, all right? And it slowly gets into your run rate. And it's sort of sneaky. So it's a silent killer. That's where I drew the line. So if I budgeted something of capital, equipment, the new DC, e-commerce expenditures, they were not allowed to spend that money until we got to that point in time and there was a second approval. So it might be in the budget, and they always come to me, Tony, this is in the budget, I get to spend it. No, you don't. Capital you don't get to spend until we get final approvals from the executive committee that we're going to move forward with that particular project. And that's how I would control the capital expenditures. And then purchasing departments. And this is another tip that I would give you. No matter what position you go into, if they didn't think you had the skill set, then they wouldn't have hired you. So you're going to be able to contribute. When I went to Tractor Supply, I had only worked at a $1.5 billion company. They were already $2 billion. I said, I don't want to mess things up, just want to keep the boat steady. When I got there, I saw stuff and I said, you guys haven't fixed this yet? It was amazing what I could contribute. So again, I would say along the way, they won't hire you unless they think you can contribute. And when you go there, always go in with confidence. Purchase department, they had no purchasing department. It was all up to every individual department. They could buy whatever they wanted. And again, when you control the purse strings, if you have a great purchasing department and do all the approvals up front, then all the back end stuff where the invoice comes in and gets paid, it's already done. But the approval has to be up front, because if you're going to approve it after you get the invoice, you're already committed. So make sure you put processes in place. Andy Grove, CEO at Intel, said, the most powerful tool of all is the word no. And you need to use that. All right, predicting the future. You need to see around corners. All right, so it's important to have a great planning and analysis department. Now, a lot of folks here, as much as you're in finance, you think, well, I'm going to be an investment banker, and that's terrific because there's some great knowledge there. But a lot of you, if you're going to go work for a company and you're going to work in a finance department, you're going to probably start off in a planning and analysis mode. And so you have to have great Excel skills, and you have to look at the future, and you have to look at things differently. And you have to really forecast and put budgets together, and it's really critical. So why is it important? You have to allocate capital, all right? And so you need to be able to have a great tool in place to understand what your cash flow is going to be. And then you need to be able to have conversations with the shareholders and the analysts. So you need to say, okay, we're going to have 2 distribution centers, one over the next 2 years, and then 2 years later, you have to put that into a model. And so there's a lot that you need to understand, and so you always have to look out into the future. So when I came to Tractor Supply, the forecasting and budgeting was under a young lady in the accounting group. And I said, you do both accounting and budgeting? She goes, yeah. And I could tell she really liked the budgeting side. And I said, well, you can't do that. Accounting people don't think like finance people. They're 2 completely different animals. And I went and I said, sorry, but we're setting up a completely separate finance department, and broke that apart. And again, I think that really was a benefit as we continued to improve the budgeting. So I would tell you 2 things. One, the accountants that are out there, make sure you load up on a lot of finance courses. And the finance folks, make sure you load up on a lot of accounting courses, because you cannot do a P&L or an income statement without understanding how it works and how the numbers flow. So whoever is on whatever side you're on, you really need to understand both sides. Then sort of lastly on predicting the future, when it came to the finance department, I came in and I said, guys, I need to know what the quarter is going to look like. And they go, well, we don't really do that. I said, well, I need a forecast. Well, we only do the budget once a year. I said, no, you need to give me a forecast. And they go, well, when do you want it? I said, every week. Every week. They said, you're crazy. Maybe once a month. I said, no, you need to do it every week. And I sat them down and I explained to them, you know what sales is every day. You know what gross margin is every day. We had reports that gave you that. I said, you know what the payroll spend is once a week. You know what occupancy is. It's sort of a fixed cost. What else is there? And they tried it, and they gave me one. It was close. Then the next week, they got better. Then the week after that, they got better. After about 6 months, they were so spot on that I could always rely on those numbers. And I knew that I could go to the street and let them know what was happening in the business. And it just took a little practice. So sometimes you just have to push through it. All right, capital allocation. I'll move through that pretty quick, but the key here is you need to understand what the company's growth ambition is. Where are they going to go? Are you a growth company? Are you more stable? Are you sort of financially engineering the company? I would tell you, work with the advisors. These people have tremendous information. Every investment banker would come in, and I really appreciate it. They come in with a book this fat. All right, now most of it's on a template, and they just drop a few numbers in, and it works through the spreadsheet. But they're doing more work than my finance department. I didn't need the finance department to tell me what my weighted average cost of capital was. I had the investment bankers coming in doing it for free. So I would tell you, always meet with them, rely on them. They give you great information. Listen to your investors and your analysts. Smart people. Some of you will be an analyst. Some of you will be investors. You got a lot of great ideas. Listen to them. You might not do them all. I had a theoretical battle between half of my investors saying, do dividends. The other ones would say, don't do dividends, do share repurchase. One guy told me share repurchase was, I thought he was saying theoretical, but he was saying that it was really more of a church and state. He was like, you don't do share repurchase. Why pay somebody to leave your stock? So, they're all different. They have different perspectives. You can learn a lot. You don't have to do what they say, but you need to listen. And we talked a little about understanding your forecast. Then you have to make that determination. How much you're going to borrow. Debt is not a bad thing. And hopefully you learn that as you go through finance. But everybody says, don't borrow money. It's not good to borrow money. It's really good to borrow money. You can't get any money cheaper than 3 to 5% in today's market. Your investors want 15 to 19%. So debt is a good thing. Just don't overextend yourself. And we saw that with the Sports Authority last year. And then make a determination, dividends. As a retailer, I was a growth company. I didn't want to do dividends for a long period of time because then people think, well, you're becoming more mature. You have too much cash flow. What are you going to do with your cash? Well, and then as a growth retailer, when I did do a dividend, I never wanted to be more than 1%. Because it was only there to attract a certain type of investors. So a lot of different considerations that you have to go through as you determine what your capital allocation focus is going to be. Then as the great communicator, you have to talk to the street. And so you have to have a voice. You have to be honest, informative. You need to be grounded in reality, and that's what a CFO can bring. And then you always have to look at, what are you going to say next year? If you give them this information this year about what went up or what went down, how's that going to relate to next year? So I would always tell you that that's important. And then the other thing is, they want to do models. They want to model out your business. Give them the information they need to model. They'll be your friend, and they'll work with you. Conference calls and conferences are memorialized. I can't tell you, I'd be talking to an investor a year later, they say, but you said on the conference call last October that you were going to do this and that you're not doing that. I'm like, wow, you're sitting there reading all these transcripts from last year, but it's memorialized. So you have to craft a message that's consistent. And then you just have to allocate the time to it. I spent probably in my last 5 years, this is all I did, was craft a message. Then CFO is a strategic partner. Every company is different, and the CFO role is different in all companies. But the most prestigious is when you can move to be your CEO's strategic partner. I was fortunate at Tractor Supply that I actually headed up the strategic process, so I was very involved. But when you think about it, who is in a better position to understand the business than the CFO? Who's the most realistic? Who knows the story behind the numbers? And who understands the capital requirements and allocation? It's the CFO. So then it's a question of, can you expand your mind? What can you think outside the box? Can you get out of that narrow perspective of just being that bean counter? Do you understand the industry, the competition? Are you a broad thinker? And that's where you on your own, you're not going to get that easily unless you had the opportunity coming up in your career to work in the strategic planning department. And I would always encourage you, if you have that opportunity, to do that, because it really broadens your background. All right, I know I'm dinging. So, in conclusion, and then we can take some questions. When my son Devin, who's the sophomore here, went through the admissions process, Don Bishop said something that really caught my attention, and I was very impressed. Oh, that's me. Yeah, kill that. Notre Dame not only prepares you to be successful, but it prepares you for life after success. And that really stuck with me. And probably a reason why I retired early, because I just feel there's some things that I can do. Maybe the speaking engagement, maybe impart some information to y'all or some tidbit or wisdom as you leave. Working with some underprivileged youth, things like that. I just felt that it was that time in my life to do that. So I think you have a great opportunity at Notre Dame. And it's going to hopefully set you up for life. But I would tell you in conclusion that you already know everything you need to know to be successful in life. All right? And it's because you learned it in kindergarten. And so I'll steal a couple lines from Robert Fulghum's book. He wrote back in I think the 70s. Share everything, play fair, don't hit people, don't take things that aren't yours, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody. Be nice, respect people. It's really simple. There you go. Put things back when you found them, clean up your own mess. You need to be organized. All right? Make your plans, be organized, follow those plans. Wash your hands before you eat and flush. All right? Hygiene. Take care of it. Warm cookies and cold milk are good for you. Take a nap every afternoon. You guys probably do that. Take care of your health. All right? Eat right and get your rest. Live a balanced life. This is important. Learn some, think some, draw and paint, sing and dance, play and work every day, every single day. Do some of that. And when you go out in the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands, and stick together. And be aware of all the wonders that are around you. All right, so with that, I did want to say that we have some hats and we have some thumb drives from Tractor Supply that they provided to me, so you can grab one on both sides before you exit. And I believe we have 10 minutes or so for questions. So, and I think we have a mic that'll be working around, or I'll repeat the question if you have any.
All right, while the microphone's getting somebody, I'll throw the first question.
All right.
Yeah, as I did your introduction and started your presentation, you talked about, you measured some of the successes in terms of the number of stores and the growth of the stores and else. As a CFO in a retail industry, that's showing one side, while at the same time the news 2 nights ago was this was for retail, for brick and mortar stores, this was a record year in terms of number of closings. So, I guess, and we talked about forecasting, CFOs, capital investments, but it seems like in the retail industry, there's a lot of trepidation as to what does the future really look like? And is that old metric still a good metric? Is it industry dependent? Do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, so the question is about retail and the industry, and it's sort of going through either a tough time or they're trying to reinvent themselves. But my opinion of retail is that the combination bricks and mortar and e-commerce those are going to be the ones that are most successful. I think Amazon obviously has done a great job. Probably doesn't drive quite the profit, but boy, they drive one top line. But people do like to go into stores. People do want a place where they can go and return. And again, in the smaller towns where the delivery is a little bit more difficult, people like to converse. And if you had a store like Tractor Supply, I can't tell you how many times I'd walk in and we would have folks in there talking about, the horse that they just birthed, what they're doing with their livestock, their cattle. They have names, and it's just a place to tell stories. So I think there is a place for it. I think that e-commerce is essential, but I don't think that retail is a place for the faint of heart at this point in time. All right, questions. So we have one.
So Tractor Supply, it's all corporate stores. I was wondering, did y'all ever think about franchising out? And if you did, why you chose against it? Or maybe at other places you worked, what are the benefits and drawbacks of having it franchised?
That's a good question. I've always been a centralized CFO management. So at the Sports Authority, no franchise. At Tractor Supply, no franchise. We always found that it's very difficult to control the look and the feel. You want someone to walk into each store and be able to navigate through it and know that it's a Tractor Supply store. It's funny, we would always say, instead of saying 1,500 stores or 1,700 stores, because we were so close to the environment or that particular marketplace, we would say we have only one store in 1,700 markets because we were that neighborhood store. So that's why we never did it. I think that franchising has its benefits, and it's good for rapid expansion. It's good when you have limited capital. But I think that if you really want to manage it, and I see that with a lot of franchises, they buy them back because they're just not properly run. So we never entertained. If we were to go international, we would most likely have gone in a joint venture with somebody that knew that particular area. But I did a little Canada when I was at the Sports Authority. My CEO at Michaels, who's at Tractor now, he did a little Canada, and it's just really, really difficult to do international, and so we haven't explored international at all. I guess you guys really, really want to get to those thumb drives. All right. We good? Any other questions? Got 2 mics. I have lunch. Oh, wait, no. It's a hand bar. All right. So we're good.
Well, I like to ensure that our guest speakers know that the lack of questions is usually due to the thoroughness of their presentations, and we greatly appreciate, Tony, your insights and stuff like that. I'll be honest, I think this is a lot more than we've typically got as to what it's like, the challenges that face a CFO, what it means to be a CFO, and for that, we greatly appreciate it, because it's the purpose of this lecture series is to gain more insight that really gets down to the specificity by just a lot of the topographical type stuff. So again, I thank you very much for that, for taking the time to be with us today. I do know people at admissions, although can't make any promises. But on that note, I can at least make a gift here for you. So again, I'd like to thank Tony for being here today.